going to be an experiment, this next piece. We're going to do another Paganini piece. We did one last year. The Paganini is the madman of the 19th century violin playing. He did some amazing type things. This piece was a solo violin piece. What I'd like to do though with this is try something new that I've never done. It's going to be totally new for them too. The way this piece sounded, it sounded as if in some ways there needed to be a story or something that goes along with this. So I decided to read, I had this book called Russian Fairy Tales. So I'd like to read you a story while the music is going. So, one second. This piece is called The Turnip. Okay, so turn down a little bit. Okay, this is like Mr. Rogers here. Grandfather planted a turnip. Time came to pick it. He took hold of it and pulled, but he couldn't pull it out. Grandfather called grandmother. Grandmother pulled grandfather, and grandmother pulled the turnip. They pulled and pulled, but they couldn't pull it out. Then granddaughter came, and she pulled grandma, and grandma pulled grandpa, and grandpa pulled the turnip. And they pulled and pulled, but couldn't pull it out. Then the puppy came, and he pulled the granddaughter, and she pulled grandma, and grandma pulled grandpa, and grandpa pulled the turnip. And they pulled and pulled, but couldn't pull it out. Then a beetle came. The beetle pulled the puppy. The puppy pulled the granddaughter, and she pulled the grandma, and grandma pulled grandpa, and grandpa pulled the turnip, and they pulled and pulled, but couldn't pull it out. Then the second beetle came, and the second beetle pulled the first beetle, and the first beetle pulled the puppy, and the puppy pulled the granddaughter, and she pulled the grandma, and grandma pulled grandpa, and the grandpa pulled the turnip, and they pulled and pulled, and couldn't pull it out. Then a third beetle came, and pulled the second beetle, and pulled the first beetle, which pulled the puppy, which pulled the granddaughter, then pulled the grandma, and the grandpa pulled the grandpa, and they couldn't pull out turnip. Then the fourth beetle came, and the fourth beetle pulled the third pulled the second, and the second pulled the first pulled the puppy, and the puppy pulled the granddaughter, and she pulled the grandma, and grandpa pulled